Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Happy New Year to you, sir.
You too.
Yeah, I just wanted to, discussion here about what's happening with Harper there with his agenda. Again, this fiduciary relationship was established back with CWE, and then it was reaffirmed in, with Duran case, they established fiduciary relationship, and then with CWE and Delgamook, where they established a relationship, they call it the sui generis. So doesn't Harper understand that at all? What can we do to, promote that decision handed by the highest court of Canada? So I was just wondering if we could strategize, and I know we got the Canadian Bar Association backing us up on some of the stuff that we were advocating for. So I think what we're trying to do is look at it from, like, these meetings are taking place, and but yet we still have to do the lobbying again. We still have to face him, and we don't want to let him off the hook now. So what do you think we could do as like we're the grassroots people here, to help our leaders there get what they're after?
Well, I think first of all, you got to realize that despite all these Supreme Court of Canada decisions backing us up, Harper doesn't give a damn about that. They're not operating in good faith. They're operating in bad faith. They want to get rid of their liabilities. They see us as a liability because of what they owe us in terms of compensation and things for lands and resources they've taken, plus the ongoing costs of program and service delivery. A lot of this, I think, is being driven for fiscal reasons. Because Harper's ideology is, I'm sure he doesn't, he wrote a letter to Dwight Dory, the head of the Congress of Aboriginal Peoples in 2005, and he said treaty people gave up their rights when they signed treaty. So Jim Prentice actually wrote that, but that was on behalf of the Conservative Party. So that's what their position is. Basically, the historic treaties, you've given up your rights. That's their interpretation. And, it's an adversarial relationship we're in. He's not being honest. He's a dishonest person. His government's dishonest. I mean, his government's a one-man show. He's running it. His Minister of Indian Affairs isn't in charge of anything. It has to go through the Prime Minister's office. So that's the first thing you got to know is, we're in a fight here. They're out to terminate our rights. And I use that word termination because I don't know how many of you are aware of that, but I also studied American Indian policy in the States. I lived on the Navajo res, and I studied under Vine Deloria Jr. at the University of Arizona in Tucson, who was a famous Indian author and professor and thinker. And in the United States, they had a policy called termination of tribes. And in 1950s, they terminated the tribal status of the Menominees in Wisconsin. You can look into this if you want. And once they terminated the tribal status of the Menominees, they were very prosperous economically in that, in their reservation. Once their tribal status was removed from them, they lost everything. And Ada Deer became their main advocate. And I think she even worked in the White House for a while, in her later years. But she got Nixon as president to reinstate them with their tribal status, but it took them 20 years. And it was called the termination policy. And, Tom Flanagan has been a lot of, has influenced Harper a lot on his policy on Aboriginal issues. And Flanagan's borrowing a lot of U.S. ideas, including termination. And also the Dawes Allotment Act, that's what's behind this private ownership stuff. Because in the 1880s, American Indian tribes lost 100 million acres because they broke up the reserves into individual allotments to individuals. And still today, even like the Navajo Res has a checkerboard area, they call it, where they lost lands. They're state lands now, they're not reservation lands. And parts of it are reservation, some aren't. So, when we're dealing with Harper, we're dealing with a guy. The difference between Harper's termination plan and the white paper is the white paper was a set of principles. Harper's implementing a legislative agenda and a policy framework, and he's got 92 tables that he's pushing to either take it or leave it. So he's accelerating, the end of our rights. And he's doing it while he's he's got the majority, and he only has 3 years, well, less than 3 years now, I guess, so he's trying to do it quickly before he has to face the next election. And he was hoping that we'd be disorganized because at the Crown First Nations gathering, there was no pressure on him. That's why he didn't do anything since then, because he didn't think he had to. He thought he had, our leadership, controlled. But that's what we're up against, the fiduciary law and that. I'll give you one more example. I just said that they're getting rid of advisory services and they're cutting back on our political organizations' ability to advocate. Last year in 2011-2012, Indian Affairs alone spent $110 million in legal costs to fight us. And the federal government spent over $500 million in legal costs last year. So that's the Department of Fisheries and Oceans and the Indian Affairs and other departments too. So while they're saying to us, well, you don't need advisory services, they've got a team of lawyers in different departments in the Department of Justice waging war on us through the courts. It's almost like when the Indian Act said we weren't allowed to hire lawyers to protect our land rights. We're almost at that state again.
Okay, just one more small supplementary question there to, like in all this, what we're doing here, like if we just go ahead and, there's a meeting to take place in next Friday on the 11th. We just go ahead and just hit them up with a lawsuit there based on what Duran did in '84 to establish that fiduciary. They ended up having to pay quite a bit for not owning up to the fiduciary that was established. So I think, from a grassroots perspective, if we did that, because what they, at that time, if you remember the case, there was only a handful of them that were stressing that they go ahead and do that because they were losing that parcel of land for the Shaughnessy Golf Course on Vancouver.
I'm familiar with that court case, yeah.
Yeah. So if we just go ahead and slap him with a lawsuit there and just wake him up, I think that's a good idea.
Well, I'm not a lawyer, but I'll point to the case with was it Sampson and Hobema that were arguing the Treaty 8 case. They took that to the Supreme Court of Canada. I think it was for oil and gas revenues, and I think they lost that case. And they spent millions and millions of dollars on that. So, I mean, going to court's a bit of a crapshoot, eh? You could win, but you might not. I mean, this is where you got to talk to lawyers about, what's your best chances of winning, and they have to look at your evidence, the facts of your situation, and then they have to look at the law and what your likelihood of winning based on your evidence and the facts that you can present to the court. So, I mean, I couldn't give you advice on that. What I'm saying to you is I think if you're going to do political action, like you've been doing, I think you'll get results. I mean, you've already gotten results, I think, from your chief and counsel and getting them to be accountable as to what they're up to. I think that's a good first step because, to me, one of our problems is our leadership isn't telling us what's going on enough as people. Our chief and counsels and the band offices. There's not enough information coming out to the people from the leaders and the band offices. And there has to be more of that. We have to know what they're talking to the government about because the ones who are the treaty rights holders or the Aboriginal title holders are the people. It's not the organizations. Certainly not AFN. They don't. They're not a rights holder. So there has to be more of that. But I guess in terms of the meeting with Harper next Friday, I know there's going to be a demonstration outside of wherever it is. I know Nomar has already said they're organizing a demonstration because they don't agree, with the chiefs meeting with Harper, making a decision amongst themselves without involving the people. Because I guess, this movement's woken a lot of them up now. And a lot are in urban areas, but also a lot, like in your case, are, from the reserves. And so to me, I guess what it is figuring out what are the demands that are going to be put to Harper. Are the people going to have a say in it, or is it just going to be the chiefs deciding behind closed doors again? Because I think the chiefs need to be more open and transparent about what they plan on telling Harper, and they should be telling us, the people, what do you plan on saying next Friday? And because that meeting is going to be a small group, I think, from what I hear. It's not going to be a big meeting like last January. And there's not going to be any cameras in there. You know, that's what they like to do, is have selection and just select the people that tend to like to go along with what the Prime Minister is going to say. Because all these things are scripted before they happen. And so they're going to try and handpick who gets in there. And they're going to have it behind closed doors. They're not going to have the cameras in there. They'll probably do a photo op after. But then, you know, they're going to put a spin on what happened inside the meeting. And then that's where they're going to try and control the message by making sure nothing leaks out about what really happens in there. That's the way those things go. I mean, I worked in Ottawa. Keith knows that. I worked in Ottawa a long time. I know how these meetings go.
Oh, yes.
Hey, so do we have to keep the protest people?
I have a question for you, Mr. Diabo. Big fan. I tweeted to you.